Ever feel like you're doing this teaching thing alone? You don't have to be. Shared teaching is all about sharing the workload through the power of collaboration and teamwork. Together, we'll walk through all the difficult parts of teaching and learn how to streamline our processes, fine-tune our time management, and develop a more manageable workload. If that sounds like a dream come true to you, then welcome to the Shared Teaching Podcast. Let's share in the teaching to make those dreams a reality. Now here's today's Shared Teaching. Hello and welcome back to the Shared Teaching Podcast. I'm your host, Susan. If you're new here, thank you so much for giving this episode a try, and I hope you will stick around for more. And if you do like the episode, don't forget to subscribe to your favorite podcast streamer. Okay, so we're talking today about one of my all-time favorite topics, which is writing. If you haven't noticed, I do talk about writing quite often because I really enjoy it, and it seems like something that a lot of teachers tend to struggle with because there's so many variables when it comes to teaching how to write. And also your students are all over the place, right? You got people that are just learning how to sound out things. And I teach second grade, by the way, so this is a true synopsis of what happens in my classroom. I have a student that's just learning how to blend sounds and figure out what sounds are, basically, to even begin to write words. And then I have students that are writing paragraphs, and then they're bored because they're waiting on me helping students sound things out, and they're way over that. So it can be very challenging. But today we're talking about 6 writing strategies that you can use to help your students that are struggling. And this works really well for first and second graders, which is what I tend to teach more towards because that is my background. But if you are not a first and second grade teacher, that's okay. I hope there are still some good takeaways for you. Now, if you are a new listener and you like this episode, please make sure that you like and subscribe to future episodes on your favorite podcast streamer. So let's go ahead and get into it. 6 writing strategies for students. Okay, so first up is brainstorming. Now, I put this first because it's what I teach first when I'm teaching the writing process. So brainstorming is how we just generate ideas that are in the pre-writing stage. So before we do any real work, we got to have some ideas, right? And so brainstorming is where those ideas come from. And many students struggle with writing, and they may act out during your writing block because they are stuck not knowing what to write. Right? So they just don't get started because they don't know where to start. So teaching them how to brainstorm really kind of alleviates some of that anxiety over, oh my gosh, what should I write about? And then nothing comes to them and they're drawing a blank, or they have too many ideas and they don't know how to narrow it down. I teach all of that in my units that I've created for second grade, but it's also something that you can easily incorporate a few mini lessons of your own using these strategies. Okay, so even though I'm really not a fan of having my students write pieces in different stages of the writing process at the same time, I am a fan of teaching them what the stages are. I feel that all students should understand this process that the writer takes to craft a finished piece of writing. So in my writing units, I'm cycling through these stages for each piece we produce. So I'm teaching them that we make a plan, then we write, then we revise and edit and publish. And we just cycle through that process as we go throughout our school year. Because I think it's important to know that not every writer starts off with a beautifully published piece of work, right? A good piece of writing takes time. So what I meant about me not being a fan of the stages is that I don't like when I'm teaching a whole class lesson, but then I have students over here that are done with the piece and they're publishing, and students over here that are just drafting, and other students that are revising. I don't like my class to be all over the place like that. I like to have a lot more control. So I like to teach that we're all on the same page at the same time so that we're all getting the benefit of the mini lesson, and that's the majority of the class. Okay, so when we teach how to brainstorm, we're showing students how to begin organizing not only their thoughts, but their writing as well. Even our beginning writers can brainstorm through drawing pictures or making lists. And my favorite ways to plan our brainstorm are to create a circle map and a tree map. And these are plans that I learned through thinking maps training. So if you're not familiar with thinking maps, it is simply a organization that has copyrighted the term thinking maps using 8 graphic organizers that we're all very familiar with. Tree maps, the double bubble, the circle map. So they've come up with a very set way to use these thinking maps so that every grade level across the school has the same wording and the same format when they're teaching the students to use these graphic organizers, which is a really great idea. So anyway, I use the circle map and tree map quite often in my writing units to just kind of show the students an easy way to plan out their thinking. And it's also something that's really easy for them to reproduce, even if they don't have like a beautiful photocopied tree map in their hand. They can draw it on a piece of paper, which is what the thinking maps has intended for teachers to do when they use their ideas. Okay, so the second strategy we're going to talk about is organizing. So organization can be very important when it comes to teaching writing for primary students. And I feel like you should teach them not only organizing their writing pieces, but also their supplies. So struggling students could also be struggling during writing time because they don't know how to organize their work. They might be disorganized with their supplies and spending all their time searching for their latest writing piece or a pencil. And you know those students, right? You're like 10 minutes in, you look over, and they still didn't even get started because they're like, I don't have my pencil, or their pencil's not sharpened, or they can't find their paper from the previous day. So teaching them ways to organize that helps them free up their time for more important things like organizing their writing. So the website teachwriting.org suggests providing students with a writing toolkit, such as lists of words to use. So for primary students, a writing toolkit could be an actual toolkit that is passed out only during writing time. Now, I tried this my second year of teaching first grade when I created writing toolboxes using actual plastic toolboxes I had found at the dollar store. And back then they were super cute. They were clear toolboxes with my favorite color, blue handles. And inside the toolboxes, I had packed pens. So I use a blue pen for revising, a red pen for editing, and a black pen for writing, because I feel that when students write with pens, they are more likely to just move forward with their writing than erase and try to reform letters and get the spelling just right. And that is a tip I picked up from Lucy Calkins many years ago, even though I no longer use her units. Okay, so in these toolboxes were the writing pens, and it was so long ago I can't remember what else I had put in there. But there were quite large toolboxes for just, enough pens for a group of students. So I had maybe like 6 of the toolboxes, and for like every 5 students or something had a toolbox that they all shared for their group. And it was very cute, but I soon phased them out as being unnecessary, even though it was cute and adorable. But I kept the idea of having a set area as my writing station where all the writing folders and supplies were kept. So once I phased out the writing toolkits, I just moved forward with those little metal containers, like the little pails, and those housed my different colored pens. And then I had a large basket that I could put all the writing folders into. So the students knew when it was writing time, they just came and got their writing folders. And then I went a step further to organize it, and I organized it by table groups. So each table group had a little sign that was stuck to separate the folders. So group 1 knew like their folders were from where it said 1 to the number 2 stick, and then they just grabbed that group and went back to their table and sorted it out amongst themselves. It made passing it out very fast, and I didn't waste a lot of time waiting on them all standing in a huge line to get their folders one by one, and every day it being in a different spot. This way it was super organized. Okay, so primary students, especially first and second graders, I know from experience, can be quite messy if not shown how to keep things orderly. Did I say that 3 times fast? So I learned quite quickly if I didn't want folders all bunched up in the back of their desks, ripped and torn, or even lost, then it was best if I passed them out and collected them as needed. And I still do this today. And probably because I like to be very organized at work, this is just something that I need for my own sanity because I spend a lot of money buying them 3-pronged plastic folders out of my own pocket. I like to reuse them more than 1 year. So if I'm keeping them and collecting them, then they stay nice for me to at least use them twice, depending on how the students care for them. So I made the mistake last year of allowing them to keep them in their desks, and I was not able to reuse, I would say, at least 2/3 of the folders. Like, they were just goners. So anyway, alongside physical organization, you want to teach organization of a writing piece. When I sat down to create my second grade writing units, I wrote them according to what I wanted in the final writing pieces. So in other words, I used backwards planning. I also looked at what the Common Core standards were for requiring what they wanted in each type of writing genre. So for example, opinion writing pieces need to have an organization of an introduction, reasons, and a conclusion. So by teaching and practicing this structure of an opinion piece multiple times, students can start being successful in crafting their own piece independently because they know what I call like the formula of how those pieces are put together. It's a really useful tool for them to move past that struggle of not knowing how to write or how their sentences go together. If you're showing them it's an introduction first, then it's your reasons, then it's your conclusion, and you practice that again and again, they start to get it and they internalize it, which is what we want as they're moving forward into state testing where they have to do writing pieces. We want them to have kind of those built-in formulas that they can pick and choose from. Okay, strategy number 3 then is editing and revising. So another crucial tool in writing strategies for students is the process of editing and revising their writing. I covered this through several tips on the Shared Teaching podcast if you want to listen to episode 45 when you're done with this episode, and I will try to link that in my show notes for you. So you can go back and hear all about how I set up editing and revising and the important pieces that you should know when you're trying to teach it to young students. So when we teach students to edit, we're teaching them to check their work for any spelling and punctuation errors. Just that, right? You're looking at kind of sentence formation and grammatical issues, right? So revising then is teaching the students to look for their word choice and then the sentence structure. So I'm asking students to think to themselves, does it sound right? Does my writing make sense? And then we're looking for ways that we can change that so it sounds even better, or it makes sense because our words are flowing in the right direction, or we didn't add a verb tense ending that we don't need there. So both editing and revising help to improve the quality of a student's writing. Because writing is difficult for many students, I recommend using writing partners when teaching this process. Pairing a strong and an average student or a low and an average student can help students better identify what they need to change. For example, the stronger writer and reader in a partnership may know how to spell more words correctly than their partner. So they're kind of helping support them without your presence being needed. So I would say think carefully and take some time to partner students in a way where there's a benefit to having that partnership. So taking a day before revising and editing can also help look at the writing with a fresh perspective. I often give a day after we finish writing a piece because that's all the time we have, quite frankly. But then we return to it the following day, and then we're revising and editing. The second day, sometimes even the third day. So I might take one day to write it, a second day to revise it, a third day to edit, and then a fourth day, and sometimes even a fifth day to publish it, because I have some very slow workers. So many times with younger students, they may even forget what they have written if they wait too long. This can also teach that very important lesson that writing is meant to be shared with others. If we can't read our own writing, it's very difficult to share our creativity with the world. And it's important that our young students start to learn this and learn that things like penmanship can be important, but also spacing between their words so that we can figure out where one word ends and the next word begins. So the fourth writing strategy I want to talk about today is going to be varying sentence structure. So we really want to teach our struggling writers how to vary their sentence structure. Now, doing that is making the writing more interesting and engaging to read. It also helps us use different sentence types, such as simple, compound, and complex sentences, which if you teach second grade like I do, that is a huge standard in grammar that they need to be able to write and combine different sentences. So what other place to practice that than in our writing time? Students should always aim to mix a type. Students should always aim to use a mix of sentence types in their writing. There we go. I knew I could talk. They should also use transitions to connect sentences and create flow. So varying sentence structure helps to convey the message more clearly and emphasize important points. So even though they're young writers, we want them to start thinking ahead and thinking about the mentor text that we read to them and try to kind of emulate that. So we don't want them always writing the same thing over and over. To teach students how to vary their sentences, we're going to choose a few good mentor texts and ask the students to listen to how each sentence starts. You may even wish to write a piece that begins the same way each time, so you're modeling what you notice in a lot of your students so that you can then fix it or revise it. So many of our students, when they're beginning writers, might write something like this. I like to play. I like to go to the park. I like the slide. I like the swings. I like the monkey bars. The end, right? Like that's very familiar to us. We see that in a lot of writing, especially in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and hopefully it's starting to phase out by third grade. So after students are discussing what they notice about these sentences, which is hopefully that they all start the same way, they can help you think of ways to improve it. You don't want to start off right away with putting the sentences on an anchor chart and then saying, okay, what's wrong with this? You just want to say, hey, what do we notice? And then eventually someone's going to say, oh, they all start the same way. And be like, oh, that's right. I wonder what it would sound like if they were different. And then you just kind of model that expectation of how can we change this writing up? And then, wow, didn't this sound so much better? Wow, we really improved our writing. So if students are not suggesting that to you, then you're going to either refer back to a mentor text or you're going to do a think aloud like I just showed you as you notice the sentence structure. So our fifth writing strategy is word choice. So using things like vivid verbs and strong adjectives is another strategy that students can use to improve their writing. Vivid verbs and adjectives create vivid images and help to convey emotions. So for example, if we use walk, or instead of using walk, the student can say stroll or saunter to create a more detailed image. Students should aim to use vivid verbs and adjectives in their writing, right? They should also avoid using weak or overused words. Sometimes I've heard teachers doing like words that should be in jail, or I'm drawing a blank right now, but you're basically like putting them on a poster and say, nope, we can't use these words. We need to think of different words. So set is dead kind of things, right? So you don't want them to use very nice, good. And I've even banned fun in my room because I hear a lot about like, it was fun. Okay, but what exactly makes it fun? I really want to stretch that thinking. So using vivid verbs and strong adjectives help make the writing more engaging and memorable. So again, this is a great time to look at a mentor text for how the author has chosen their verbs and adjectives. You might even wish to create an anchor chart collecting those exciting words as you read through each text. And this is something that can be done outside of writing time if you're very short on time like I am. If you have a read aloud time of your day, then just ask kids when you hear a really exciting word, raise your hand, we'll add it to our chart. And it can be something just super quick that naturally is happening as you're reading stories in other parts of your day. So it doesn't always have to be in writing, but then you're going to bring it back to writing when you reference the chart during writing time. Our last strategy of today is modeling. So this is perhaps the most effective writing strategy for students, and that's to model the writing process and your expectations. So each day I teach a writing lesson, I am modeling what I want the students to do when it is their independent time. This is helping the students to not only be independent, but I can work with my more struggling writers because my students have a clear understanding of the assignment. So I have something built into my units called it's kind of the I can or we can. Oh my goodness. See, this is what happens when I record late at night. I start drawing blanks. Okay, so it's the I can, we can, you can. There we go. I had to imagine it in my head for a minute. So when I'm teaching the whole class, I'm asking them you're just listening. And then we get to the we can portion and I say, this is where you're participating. And then I get to the you can and I'm like, this is what I want you to be doing. And I might even have an example because we just practiced it in the we can and it's mirroring what the you can assignment is. Hopefully that makes sense. So the expectations are super clear. The assignment is super clear because we just did an example together. Kind of like when you do math, right? You do a math example together and then you release them for independent work and their examples are similar to the practice problems you just had. We're doing the same thing when we're teaching writing. So I ask them to do their assignments, but when I'm modeling either a part of the writing process or I'm using a read aloud that's modeling examples of good writing. So when you're modeling, you are providing that really clear understanding of what good writing looks like and also how to achieve it. By watching you model, the students can learn how to structure their writing, use descriptive language, like we talked about in word choice, and revise their writing to make it more effective. So they're listening to them read their stories back to themselves or their partner, and they're saying, hey, you know what, that doesn't sound quite right, or I think I can make that sound a little bit better. Or maybe their partner is pulling things out and noticing things and saying, hey, you used that word said. Remember, we didn't want to use said. We're going to change it. So this is where partners are very important. But the most important thing to remember when modeling is you are thinking aloud to explain your thought process to students. So it might seem silly if you've never tried this strategy before, but it's one of my favorite ways to teach, especially if you teach anywhere from K through 2, and maybe I would say even 3rd grade can really benefit from this strategy too, because it's allowing them kind of to peek inside your brain and figure out your thought process of how you come up with these things. If you're not talking about how you come up with it, then they're kind of missing a gap in your instruction if you think about it. So if you've never tried it, I encourage you to give it a few times and it will start to feel more natural every time you do it. Because I've been doing it for so many years now, I don't even notice it as silly anymore because I am so used to it. It's just a natural part of my teaching now. So for example, I'm reading a book and I'm like, wow, look at these illustrations. Oh, you see here, like these waves are showing me that the water is moving. Wow, I can really use that when I go to draw my pictures later because I wrote a story about me being at the beach. And you're just kind of throwing that out there as you read, and then you go to the next page and you read the next part of the story, and maybe something else in that illustration is sparking your interest and you're talking about that piece of the illustration. Wow, do you see these details here? But the author didn't talk about them when I was just reading about them. That's interesting. I know that illustrations can help me add details to my story without writing it. Wow, okay, I can really use that too. And then you move on. So it does seem silly because you're kind of like talking to yourself like you're not having anyone else listen and you're not really doing it out loud, right? But the kids find it engaging. They find it amusing. And I kind of teach like that all the time, being silly and like pretending to talk to myself, especially when nobody's answering me. So that's why I kind of really like that strategy. So definitely check out modeling. Give that a chance. Okay, so the 6 writing strategies that we talked about today that can help your struggling writers are to brainstorm, to organize both their writing and their supplies, to edit and revise their work so that they're learning to look over their things and think about them when they're done, to vary sentence structure, to think about that word choice and use mentor text to help show students how not every sentence starts out the same, and which leads me right into word choice for number 5. We want them to use very vivid verbs and strong adjectives and start replacing things like nice, good, fun with more memorable wording. And last but not least is modeling. We want to think aloud. We want to show them exactly what we mean. We want to write in front of them, show them how we're sounding out words, spaces between our words for our sentences, capitals, periods, all of that. We want to be showing students when we're writing how to actually do that. So if you liked this episode, I want to know which one of these 6 were your favorite writing strategies for students and which one will you be trying first. So don't be afraid. I love getting emails. So you can email me, susan@sharedteaching.com. I would love to hear your thoughts, or even if you have more ideas for future episodes, I would like to hear those as well. So bye for now. Stay tuned next week for an all-new episode. If you've loved this show, then join me in sharing the teaching,
hitting that subscribe button,
and leaving us a review on
iTunes,
so we can be found by more teachers like you who are ready to start sharing the workload. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Find new episodes each week on sharedteaching.com. Thanks for listening to the Shared Teaching Podcast.